What is the most pain you've ever experienced? Gallstones trying to move through a tiny space that wasn't big enough for them. Got my testes twisted and was in absolute agony for 3 hours before I got surgery. I got a parasitic infection in my eye from using contacts in the shower, transmitted by my roommate's ferret. The months of light sensitivity sucked, as my eyes were effectively open sores. Even a breeze on my face was rather painful. But then came the surgery and treatment, where they anesthetized my eye and proceeded to scrape at it with a needle while I had to look on in horror and feel my eyeball pushed up against my skull. Then for the next month I had to put literal bleach on my eye every 3 hours to sterilize it. Imagine setting an alarm, putting bleach in your eyes, trying to fall asleep amid the burning, finally falling back asleep just before the alarm goes off again for another drop. That definitely broke me. Don't duck around with contacts, kids. Appendix rupturing. Thought I was just having a stomach ache. Waited in bed for hours. Got so bad I couldn't walk. Ambulance came and had to wheel me out in the fetal position. Emergency surgery. Almost died. Hospitalized for 2 weeks. It was ugly. Had an ovarian cyst that burst. First it felt like normal period pain. Fast forward an hour later. I am throwing up in the bathroom and crying. Of course I had no painkillers in the house and it was around 6 AM so no store was open. The only thing I could think of doing was drive to work because I knew there was medical kit with painkillers. So I drove there in complete agony. Very safe. I took few painkillers and went to lie on the conference room floor. Nice surprise to my colleagues when they arrived. After that episode I got endometriosis diagnosed. Edit. Grammar for clarity. Also, I am so sad to hear all your stories. So many of us suffering this. I hope you will find a way to ease your pain and to get diagnosed. I had a student stab me once. 16 stitches across my right ribs. It sucked. A lot. But when I got to the hospital and they started stitching it up, the adrenaline had worn off and the local anesthetic they gave me was not working. The doctor, who I'm pretty sure studied medicine under Dr. Mengele, was not gentle or polite about it. Feeling him pierce my skin as he stitched me up made me throw up and black out. When I was in 3rd grade I broke my arm jumping off a swing. It was Labor Day weekend, so I guess all the good doctors at the hospital were on vacation, and the resident who was treating me set my arm wrong. They didn't notice until I went back for follow-up x-rays a couple weeks later to check how I was healing. My bones had already partially healed, but the angle was wrong. So what they did was saw open a bit of my cast and insert a wedge device and crank it until my forearm was straight. They needed to bend it a good 30 degrees. I didn't get any sort of painkiller. Hurt like duck. One time I woke up to terrible pain in my lower stomach. It was so bad that I kept on fainting and throwing up. I was taken to the hospital and they couldn't find anything. Then the pain just magically went away. Physical? Knee surgery. I was literally counting minutes until I could take another painkiller. Emotional? Watching a 12-year-old find out her mom was dead. I can still hear her crying. Migraines. Whenever I get them I just crawl under my bed covers and try not to die. When I was 11 my front tooth got knocked out in one piece. I find the tooth and run home. It was a holiday so the dentist said to save time clean it up in milk and put it back in and he will stabilize it once we get to his clinic. So my mom has to out the tooth back in the gaping fresh wound. I was crying and my mom was like, oh shut up, it's not that bad. I lost it again like 27 years later. Lol. In a convo with someone who was stung by a box jellyfish, say if they'd had a gun they would have shot themselves. No question. The guy was a university college professor. Really genuine individual, which made what he said all the more real. Box jellyfish are the most venomous creatures on earth. Yay Australia. Kidney stones. Multiple around 4mm. It was like the worst poop cramp after doing 10,000 squats while being hit in the nuts. I once had an infection inside my wisdom tooth. That was the worst pain I've experienced. Painkillers didn't touch it, and just breathing was agony. I spent 2 days awake before I could get it removed. I know a lot of people have said kidney stones, but I got added agony. I was on the floor writhing from the pain and I had to vomit. The pain of a stone felt like someone actively had their hand inside me and were ripping around inside. I couldn't control my body enough to sit up to vomit, but I got to my side at least so I wouldn't choke on the vom. I heaved and the pressure made my vision technicolor with pain. That's when I popped a disc in my back from an old rowing injury. I momentarily marveled that I could even register this new agony. Just like the first time, white hot fire ran up my spine and I couldn't breathe anymore. I remember begging for death in my head. I couldn't scream as vomit was now shooting out of my nose because my jaw had clenched shut. I started basically drowning and my whole body was vibrating. Eventually I passed out. When I came to, I started to sobbing because I was still alive. Not from relief. I was so utterly disgusted that I was alive. That's when my roommate found me. I still get flashbacks of how badly I wanted to die. I know for a fact if I had had a knife I wouldn't have hesitated to plunge it straight into my neck. It is a terrifying memory. I had to get a physical for the Navy. They found minute amounts of blood in my urine. You couldn't see it when I peed. Only using their testing process. They had to figure out what was wrong with my bladder. First was an ultrasound of my full bladder. Annoying, but not painful. Then, apparently, the prostate can cause that type of issue. Got a finger up the butt. Again, uncomfortable, but not really painful. The last thing was to shove a camera up my urethra. They gave me Vicodin and Valium. The same thing that gave me for my vasectomy. Nothing else pain-wise was given. Wheel. As soon as they shoved the camera up my D, I sobered up and felt the most intense pain ever. They proceeded to wiggle it around in my bladder and trip my bladder is full switch. Got done and tried to pee. Visible blood this time and I felt violated for the rest of the day. Found the same blood about 4 years later. Made them knock me out because I wasn't doing that awake again. Nothing conclusive was found. Doc said that some people have microscopic amounts of blood in their urine. I happen to be one of the unlucky ones. I once had to reinflate my own lung after a 500cc pleural effusion was drained from one side. Every breath was agony. I had to keep taking deep breaths over several hours to fully expand my lung to full size. DRs gave me Dilaudid every 2 hours that didn't even touch the pain. Only time I've ever gotten close to hitting a 10/10 pain. One time my ibs got so bad at a party that I had to call my wife to the loo to hold my hand because I couldn't take it anymore. If it had gone on much longer I honestly think I would have passed out. My mom died right before quarantine. I had a wart on the inside of my nose removed without any type of numbing. It took 2 hours. IUD insertion. It was brief, but the worst pain I ever experienced. The nurses said I handled it well. Then I proceeded to throw up at a stoplight while driving home. Apparently some women only feel mild discomfort during the process. This didn't happen to me, but it's worth a mention. My little brother's best friend was playing on an old metal swing in our back garden. He climbed up the swing and decided to slide down the metal pole. Unfortunately, an old rusty screw was sticking out. He tore his scrotum open, to the point a testicle was out. Horrible. He didn't tell anyone. Went home and fainted into his mom's arms. This kid was so accident prone, but this beats all of his accidents. Anyway, he had his bag stitched closed and healed well. Cornea transplantation. Imagine 100 spiders itching all over your eye after the operation and for the following 4/5 days. I've broken several bones, but when I dislocated my left knee, that was by far the worst pain. My kneecap spun around the backside of my knee and took all the nerves and tendons with it. I've survived more than 10 heart attacks. I suffer from a condition that makes my heart rate go nuts. They hurt like a itch. Dehydration. I was in college and I got mono terribly. I had a high fever and my throat was mostly closed and I couldn't swallow at all. Eventually everything just felt like a dull pain, until I'd move and it would become a very sharp pain. I remember somehow getting to the campus medical ward, and the nurse telling me I was at a 10 pain level. In any case, 2 IVs later and I was feeling a little better. Later on I broke 2 vertebrae in a car crash and the dehydration was considerably worse. DR treating my ingrown toenail without numbing it. Tore an abdominal muscle once because I had a respiratory infection and wouldn't stop coughing, because it was a core muscle. I could do almost nothing without experiencing excruciating pain. Being burned alive on 30% of my body and surviving in critical condition and then having to rehab in an ICU. The searing neurological pain of repeated debriding to promote healthy tissue growth was so much worse than the initial burning. This was 10 years ago and I literally started crying as I am writing this, just from how vividly I can remember the pain. Got bit by a brown recluse when I was 8, which caused a staph infection on my back. I had it for a week before noticing it, and when I got to the doctor they told me that if it wasn't for the infection digging into my muscle I'd be dead already. He then told me I was in for some serious pain and told me to bite down on this leather strip. He had to push everything out of it and cauterize it. I have never experienced pain like that since. And I've broken quite a few of bones, one of which came out of my skin. It was nothing compared to this. I passed out 3 separate times from the pain. The police were called by the neighboring business because they heard a child being brutally tortured. And this was with morphine and local anesthetic. My mom was crying her eyes out because she felt so bad about what was happening. And the doctor told me it was the hardest thing he'd ever had to do. The newest Harry Potter book had just come out and was expensive. But my mom bought it for me and cooked my favorite meal of all 3 days in a row. I'm not gonna lie, I was ducking bawling when I had to go back for the checkup on it because the doctor warned me that he might have to do it again if the infection returned. Which it didn't. The doctor gave me the $50 my mom had paid for the appointment and said that he couldn't accept money for what he did to me. Still charged my insurance though, which I gave to my mom for the book. I usually had to work for the money for the Harry Potter books, which my mom used to take our family out to dinner as a celebration for the infection not returning. Wife died and told 5-year-old mom was dead. Very painful. Wife leaving me while I was deployed. My mother died unexpectedly on the day of my 6th birthday party. That hurt. The day my dad moved out after my parents split up. I was driving hands-free, downhill on my bike and looked behind me. I drove into a rock and my bike flipped and I landed on my face. I looked like that dude from Batman Dark Knight after that and I broke a tooth of. That was painful. But the most painful thing was getting rejected by a girl after I confessed my love to her. I rarely get these but I start with a migraine then progresses to a pain behind my left eye, vomiting, then numb muscle and can hardly move. Don't know much about it but yeah, it sucks. Did surgery to remove my 2 wisdom tooth but the dentist just used 1/4 of the anesthesia dosage. I felt everything and even nearly passed out when she got to broke my tooth in 4 pieces. It gonna hurt a little she said and I didn't complain cause thought I was overreacting. She also touched the nerve while removing the tooth pieces and again almost fainted. Got back to my house like I've had been violated, remaining in fetal position for hours. All this cause I had dental insurance and didn't actually pay for the surgery. I had a really bad period once. Opioid withdrawal. It was actually why I got sober. I never wanted to experience withdrawals ever again. Before I could get on Suboxone. And before I could get into detox, I spent a couple of weeks withdrawing at my parents' place. I was homeless. It was a long, protracted pain. The worst flu of your life combined with being hit by a truck. I was constantly throwing up and passing out. My bones hurt. I got no rest, as the pain bled over into my dreams. And I had vivid dreams of being homeless again, looking for drugs. It hurt more knowing that I could easily pick up the one thing that would take all that pain away, instantly. The worst part was that my parents barely cared and never checked up on me. I could hear them laughing and making fun of me for my poor choices upstairs. I had to get up and empty my puke bowl in my bathroom by myself, which felt like a mile away. Withdrawing was more painful than childbirth, and I had given birth twice before. 755 days clean from heroin and meth now. When I was a kid, I once ran around the barbecue. My brother removed the hot barbecue grill and put it on the ground. I continued running. That's how I grilled both my feet. I was shot in an attempted carjacking. Took a .45 hollow point blank in my back. Bullet entered my back. Collapsed my lung. Paralyzed me and broke 2 ribs. To top that all off, my foot was stuck on the gas and I hit a brick wall going 70 miles per hour. Was in the hospital for 7.5 months. Numerous surgeries and stage 4 bed sores. After the swelling went down I was able to rehab and get back on my feet but still can't run but not complaining. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. If you are lucky. I've suffered a kidney stone once. Those of you who never had it will never understand what it's like wanting for someone to just knock you out. The pain is like nothing you can ever imagine and will scare you so bad of catching it again that you'll change your diet permanently. I cried so hard when the pain was getting too much in the ER and they just left me to wait on their bed for what must have been an hour. Started when I was playing League and it was enough to stop playing games during the time period. I couldn't do anything with that level of pain. I vomited more than I ever could in my entire life. No idea. It was just a consistent pain in the abdomen that lasted around a few hours. I was sweating. My heart felt it was doing a salsa rhythm. Blood pressure tanked, according to the paramedic, and I couldn't move. Couldn't even speak without feeling like I was in agony. When I got to hospital they gave me gas and air. Told me I wasn't pregnant and sent me home when it started to pass. Never figured out what that was. Posting late. No one will read this. Was going about 50 miles per hour on my Vespa when the car to the right of me decided that the right lane between two intersections was the best place for a U-turn. I was luckily thrown clear. Did a couple of flips and smacked into the pavement. No serious injuries except for some road rash and a compound dislocation on my big toe. Get to the ER and the doctor says, if we can't get this back in you are going to need surgery. He then spends the next 10 minutes trying to force my bone back into the body manually with small breaks while he examines and tries to figure out why it isn't working. Turns out the bones in the tip of my toe were basically shattered, so while he is squeezing my toe trying to shove the bit of bone back in, the shards and the tip were just grinding together. He eventually got frustrated and gave up. A young orthopedic surgeon came in later wanting to take a crack at it. First question he asked was, hasn't he gotten any morphine yet? Followed by, why the duck not? Dr. Kim, I will be forever grateful to you. Recovering from a circumcision when I was 19. I've been beaten into the dirt by bullies, cut with knives, burnt myself on a welder, nearly been crushed under a cave and nearly drowned in a scuba accident. After a botched recovery, infection and my symptom of hypersensitivity from a pre-existing condition, I have not experienced worse agony. It was made worse by the fact there were periods of reprieve when I didn't move, only to shift my weight, make contact and relive the agony. It's why I'm such an avid opponent of genital mutilation, both male and female. I don't give a rip how important it is to your religion. Capital I. As a young adult with my spotted history, consider that the worst pain I've ever experienced. Imagine what it's like for a baby who's never experienced pain before and doesn't understand what's happening. With exceptions. Jewish people, American gen pop and African tribes are literally torturing babies for religious or aesthetic reasons and it's disgusting. Period pain. I could wake up in the night because the pain was so intense. My body can't bear it and at times I've thrown up or fainted. Not fun at all. The first time I had sinus surgery I also had a rhinoplasty. The sinus cavities in my cheeks weren't fully formed so they had to build those up. At my check-in appointments they would stick a tube up my nose into my sinus cavities to suck out blood clots. My nose was broken from the rhinoplasty. I could feel the inside of my face being vacuumed and giant chunks of blood were being pulled out through my nose. I almost passed out the first time. In my early 20s I had 6 operations for a pilonidal sinus, for which there wasn't one procedure that was 100% effective. One surgery left the wound open and packed with gauze. A full bottle of gauze. The idea was to remove the gauze and the wound heals from the bottom up. By the time the initial change of dressing happened over 6 hours had passed and the blood on the gauze had dried and adhered to the walls of the wound. It took 3 big orderlies to hold my legs still and I gripped the handrails of the bed so hard the eye popped out of my arm. My dad said it was like watching a clown pull the endless rainbow handkerchief out of its mouth. My OB-GYN spent 45 minutes unsuccessfully trying to insert my new IUD, using larger and larger rods to try to force open my cervix. Eventually, she stopped because she was too uncomfortable to continue violating her oath to do no harm. As it turns out, I didn't end up needing birth control anyway because it took like a year before I'll let anyone near my V again. Had chest surgery to correct some deformed ribs. I was given an epidural during the surgery, and when I finally came round, I quickly learned the epidural wasn't not connected properly. Safe to say waking up without much pain relief was not very fun. I have fully lived the expression feeling like death. I had a pinched sciatic nerve in HS, and I had to miss a few days a week for like a month. I don't know how it happened, but I remember just feeling like someone was taking a knife and shoving it into my spine. It was so bad I'd freeze up and not be able to move cause it was shooting up my spine and paralyzed me. It eventually became unpinched without the need for surgery, but that was on the table until it started to get better. Severe pancreatitis from a botched gallbladder removal surgery. Levels in the 4000s. Ended up in the hospital 12 days. 3 surgeries later. And pancreatitis 6 times that year. I had a collapsed lung when I was younger. The chest tube wasn't draining and they didn't know why, so they made a plan to adjust it. They gave me some morphine to dull the pain. But I literally had someone wiggling a metal tube between my ribs and inside my chest cavity. It was not pleasant. I have had a lot of different types of pains, broken bones, surgeries, etc. I saw the person who mentioned the testicular surgery. I had an emergency testicular surgery when I was 15. It was painful. Nothing, however, compares to when I cracked my tooth open and had an exposed open nerve. Most painful experience in my life, and nothing else really even compares. Absolute agony. So much that my dentist gave me an emergency surgery at 2 AM to accommodate. Broken collarbone. I was playing ninjas with a bunch of neighborhood kids and got tossed into a hole that was a bit too small for both my shoulders to go into and snap. Broke it and had the whole summer ruined. I still hang with the dude that threw me and he still feels bad about it. But I like laughing about it. It happened almost 30 years ago. Pilonidal cyst lancing during an infection. It felt like the wisdom tooth extraction scene in Castaway, but on my butt. I really don't think the painkillers worked. I screamed in the ER. Discovering I had gallstones after eating a big ole juicy burger. 0/10 would not recommend. I thought this would just be 100 comments saying herniated prolapsed disc. Cause that it is ducking awful. Guess Reddit skews a little younger than I thought. Enjoy your spines while you still can.